Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a seriously fascinating intersection between hard, Nobel-winning quantum physics and profound theology. And we're going to see how our source material uses this exact intersection to address one of the biggest problems we face today: modern isolation. Our source material today makes a really compelling case for how the mathematical realities of the quantum world might just be the ultimate cure for that crushing sense of loneliness. So I want you to genuinely consider this. What if space and distance are, well, just an illusion? Think about it. We navigate our entire lives believing that physical distance is this absolute unbreakable barrier, right? If someone is 1,000 miles away, they are disconnected from us. But what if the fabric of reality isn't some vast empty void separating us, but rather a deeply intertwined network? We're going to peel back the layers of this mystery today, but to do that, we actually need to see how physics itself had to completely rewrite its own rules. So for centuries, starting way back with Isaac Newton in the 17th century, physics relied heavily on something called the principle of locality. Basically, this is the idea that something can only affect something else through a direct physical mediator, and absolutely nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Even Einstein considered this principle incredibly sacred. In fact, in 1935, when quantum mechanics started suggesting that particles could somehow communicate instantly across vast amounts of space, Einstein flat out rejected it. He famously called it spooky action at a distance. But fast forward to 1964, and a physicist named John Bell comes along. He creates a mathematical test, Bell's inequality, to prove once and for all whether the world was local or not. And guess what? The experiments that followed, which actually culminated in the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics, proved Einstein wrong. The purely local worldview was mathematically dismantled. Which brings us to this absolutely crucial, paradigm-shifting reality: quantum non-locality. When two particles become entangled, their properties are no longer independent of each other. They literally become one single quantum system. If you measure a particle here on Earth, you instantly know the state of its entangled partner, even if that partner is all the way on the opposite side of the galaxy. And here's the kicker: there is absolutely no physical signal traveling between them. There's no beam of light, no radio wave, nothing. It is a fundamental connection that exists entirely outside of our concept of space. And this brilliantly illustrates a massive paradigm shift. In classical physics, we're living in a world of limits. It dictates what's possible, where space and distance restrict literally every single interaction. But quantum reality? That is a mind-bending framework where things are connected instantly, going way beyond the very concepts of space and time. In fact, physicist Anton Zeilinger, one of those Nobel winners we just mentioned, stated that there are correlations that simply have no explanation within the confines of space-time, which strongly suggests there's a dimension sitting entirely above it. Now, what our source material does next is completely fascinating. It draws a direct line between this Nobel-winning physics and ancient theology. In the Islamic tradition, there is a concept called al-amr, or the divine order. It essentially describes a dimension where space simply is not a boundary. The text points to a very specific quote from the Quran: "We are closer to him than his jugular vein." The argument being made here is that this isn't just nice poetic imagery, it's being presented as a literal description of an architecture that anticipated this exact non-local connection centuries before quantum physics ever had the math to prove it. To really understand how that ancient quote maps to the physics, we have to look at the fabric of the universe itself. Quantum fields, like the electromagnetic field, for instance, they aren't just floating out there in some empty void. They exist within every single Planck length. For context, that is literally the absolute smallest measurable unit of reality. These fields exist inside every single atom, right there between the nucleus and the electrons. They are closer to matter than geometry itself. So the theological argument presented in the explainer is this: if two tiny particles can remain perfectly entangled regardless of distance, then the divine is even more connected. It proposes a reality where God isn't existing inside of space, but rather all of space exists inside the divine. And as another great example of these invisible foundational structures, the source highlights the 2012 discovery of the Higgs boson over at CERN. The Higgs field is actually what gives elementary particles their mass. Without it, everything would just be massless, zooming around the universe at the speed of light. Finding it completely validated the standard model of particle physics, proving once again that there are these invisible, mathematically perfect structures out there maintaining the entire stability of our reality's fabric. Actually, let's hit pause for a quick second, because it's incredibly important to establish some strict boundaries here so we don't accidentally veer into science fiction. quantum nonlocality does not mean we can suddenly send faster-than-light text messages to Mars. When you measure an entangled particle, the outcome you get is completely random, which means you absolutely cannot use it to encode or transmit a classical message. The speed of light, that remains an absolute strict limit for classical information. We are not talking about breaking the universe's speed limit. We're talking about a deeper layer of reality where the track itself just doesn't exist. So, if they aren't communicating through space, where exactly is this connection happening? Physicists call this dimension Hilbert space. It's essentially a mathematical space containing all possible states of a quantum system. But our source draws a really stunning parallel to theology here, mapping this concept directly to al-Law al-Mahfuz, which translates to the preserved tablet in Islamic tradition. Both of these frameworks describe a space or a dimension where all events, all states, and all possibilities are housed together as one indivisible whole, completely undisturbed by the physical distances of our universe. And this interconnectedness extends all the way to the conservation of information. Hard quantum physics dictates that quantum data simply cannot be destroyed. Now look at this verse from Surah Luqman. If there be the weight of a mustard seed, Allah will bring it forth. The source material argues that this perfectly mirrors the principle of quantum conservation. No particle, no matter how deeply hidden inside a rock or lost somewhere in the heavens, is missing from the underlying data of the universe. In theology, this is the domain of Al-Hafiz, the guardian, who has access to literally all information non-locally. Let's ground this with a deeply human story from the text. In the Quranic story of Prophet Yaqub and his son Yusuf, there is this striking moment where a caravan departs from Egypt, and hundreds of miles away in Canaan, Yaqub instantly says he can smell Yusuf's scent. It's a really profound moment of connection in the narrative, but let's analyze it strictly from a physical perspective. Under the strict everyday rules of classical physics, what Yaqub experienced is entirely impossible, period. Scent is made of physical molecules. Those physical particles cannot instantly cross hundreds of miles of desert wind. Materialistic physics would tell you that this kind of instant detection, without any passage of time for the particles to actually travel, simply breaks the laws of the universe. Which leads us to ask a really pivotal question. Was this just magic? Or is it a demonstration of a law of quantum reality? The source proposes a deeply provocative idea here. If two tiny subatomic particles can remain entangled over massive galactic distances, why couldn't the exact same principle apply to two intimately connected human consciousnesses? If Yaqub and Yusuf were effectively acting as one entangled system within that divine order we talked about, the information of Yusuf's presence wouldn't even need to travel. It would just arrive, non-locally, with zero time delay. This whole concept implies a deeply layered reality. The Quran refers to the divine as al-Batin, the inner. This represents the absolute deepest, most fundamental layer of existence. Our everyday normal life happens on the outer layer, right? That's where distances are very real and getting to the grocery store is always going to take you 10 minutes. But on the inner layer, physical distance completely vanishes and everything merges back into a singular, unified point of connection. And this is exactly where the physics and the theology come together to deliver an incredibly powerful message for us today. You are not isolated. The most common pain of the modern human experience is this profound, crushing feeling of loneliness. We walk around feeling like tiny, separate atoms just floating in a massive, totally indifferent void. But what this explainer shows us is that this separation is, both scientifically and spiritually, a complete illusion. In this non-local field, the field of the divine order, every single electron is fundamentally connected to what it was entangled with at the very dawn of existence. Because of this, the source argues your intentions, your prayers, your pain, they don't just vanish into an empty vacuum. You don't have to shout across light years of empty space hoping to be heard. Because the connection is non-local and instantaneous, the very moment you articulate a thought in the dimension of the order, it has already been heard. So, the grand takeaway of our analysis today is that Bell's theorem didn't just win a Nobel Prize, it fundamentally killed the materialistic, strictly local worldview. The hard mathematical proofs of quantum mechanics have completely destroyed the idea that reality is just some random collection of disconnected, isolated parts. That feeling of loneliness we all carry, it's born from forgetting that we are, at a fundamental subatomic level, entirely entangled within the one. But as with all truly great science, answering one question immediately opens the door to an even bigger one. We know space isn't a boundary for this connection, but what happens as the universe continues its accelerating expansion? Can galaxies being ripped apart at absolutely incredible speeds eventually stretch and snap this profound quantum entanglement? Does information eventually get lost beyond the cosmic horizon? That plunges us straight into the wild mysteries of black holes, the holographic principle, and the frankly terrifying concept of entropy. It is a massive puzzle, and definitely one we'll have to explore in a future explainer. Until then, remember to look at the world around you just a little bit differently. Thanks for learning with me today.